Hey everyone, it's Megan and welcome to my September 2015 wrap-up. So I read a total of 13 books this month and only one of them was manga, and that's actually pretty impressive for me. I honestly didn't think that I would get through this many books this month, but I predict that the number is just gonna descend as I get further and further into the school year. So the first thing I read this month is Wandering Sun, Volume 8 by Takako Shimura. This is a series that I sort of started last year. I've talked about it before. This boy, born a boy, wants to dress like a girl. I'm not sure that he wants to be a girl per se, but really wants to dress like a girl. And so I've been reading the English translations as they're released and as they appear at my local library. So this is the most recent one that has happened. And yeah, not too much has progressed plot-wise, but it's just typical middle school goings-on, daily goings-on. Yeah, not improving, not getting worse, so I'm just gonna keep reading it and see how it goes. The artwork is beautiful, the covers are gorgeous. They're just really beautifully done books, actually, and I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I completed is Second Chance Summer by Morgan Matson. This is the only one left of hers that I had to read before I had read everything. Just as a little side note, the cover for Morgan Matson's newest book, which is coming out in May 2016, The Unexpected Everything, has just come out, and it is just beautiful. There's a pug on the cover. I'm gonna read it. So this book follows a 16, 17-year-old girl named Taylor, and her dad has stage 4 cancer, and he has decided that as a sort of last summer all together as a family, they're gonna go back to their house on a lake out in the country, as they used to do when she was a kid, like every summer. But they haven't done it for about 5 years, and he just wants one final summer there. So it was a very emotional book. I realized the kind of little problems that I have with Morgan Matson. I find she is almost at times too pure, even for teenagers. Like, it's almost like she doesn't really want to go into the hard stuff that is so like normal for teenagers. It's like she acts like it doesn't exist, and then at some point, I think it was like 400 pages in, she randomly threw in the fact that they were drinking, like as an afterthought, and up to that point it was just so pure, and so it just was a little disjointed for me. But all in all, I thought it was a really well written book. I cried, I did, and I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Finding Audrey by Sophie Kinsella. This book just came out a few months ago. It's her newest one, and it's the very first YA novel that she has attempted to do, and it is about this girl, Audrey, and she went through a traumatic experience in high school. We're not really told what, which is probably the first thing that kind of annoyed me. Like, even by the end of it, we're still left with some questions. But anyway, it's left her with an anxiety condition where she cannot look people in the eye, she can't leave the house, and it's very difficult for her to interact with people outside of her immediate family. I don't think it's the strongest story that Sophie Kinsella has ever done, and it's not my favorite book by her. I prefer the Shopaholic series way more, but at the same time, she does have a way of grabbing a reader right away from the first page, and I was grabbed and sort of sucked into the story, and she can do comedy pretty well too. There were a number of laugh out loud bits in this. So yeah, it was okay, and I give it a 3 out of 5 stars. And the next book that I completed is Cress by Marissa Meyer. This is the 3rd book in the Lunar Chronicles series, and oh my gosh, the time is almost upon us when the wonderful conclusion winter will be out. So in this one, we follow Cress. It's kind of obvious from here that it is the version of Rapunzel that Marissa Meyer is doing, and how she fits into the story with Scarlet and Cinder, and it's really good. There was so much plot and character development in this. It's quite dramatic at times, and just really, really good. It's just leading to such a wonderful build-up that I just cannot wait for the finale to come in the form of winter next month. Needless to say, I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I completed is The Devil's Storybook by Natalie Babbitt. I have been meaning to read this for such a long time because I love The Search for Delicious. It's one of my favorite books of all time. And so, yeah, I am pretty disappointed that I hadn't read this, like, up to this point. That was my first thought. I was like, how has it taken me this long to read this? It was so good. She has such a great way of introducing comedy. Like, it's a Devil's Storybook. You think it's going to be all morbid and everything, and it is, but not really. It's a light-hearted, light-hearted morbidity. That's the word I'm looking for. So basically, it's a collection of short stories involving the devil himself, and they're really short and really good. There were a few that really stood out to me, and so this is my sister's copy, and I'm going to definitely be buying myself my own copy as soon as I find it in a secondhand store. And I hope it's not too difficult to find, but yeah, I give this a 4 out of 5 stars. I really liked it. The next book I completed is Girls Standing on Lawns by Myra Coleman. I've been trying to read every book that Myra Coleman's ever done because I am just such a huge fan of her artwork. She is an amazing illustrator. She works really well with colors, not so much realism, but just really, she evokes a feeling within you when you look at her work. And so this, actually, her illustrations weren't featured too prominently in this. Well, yes, it was. They were interspersed with photographs that I believe were personal as well as collected from the Met, I think, the Metropolitan Museum of Art. They have a huge collection. I learned like thousands and thousands of photos. So these are old photos of women standing on lawns. It's pretty self-explanatory. And I believe there's some text interspersed in there, but yeah. It was really good and profound, and it just gave a look through the decades going back to like the first days of photography of just women standing on lawns. It was really cool. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. And the next book I completed is Bambi's Children by Felix Salten. I have been waiting like a year to read this, and I am so glad I did. I really enjoyed it. I love being in this world, like the literary world of Bambi. Love the Disney film. It's my favorite one. It actually is. But I love the way Felix Salten writes, in that it's almost like there's high society gentry going on within the forest. In the way the characters talk, it's with nobility and polite mannerisms, and it's really cool. So this one focuses on Bambi's children, which are Guri and Gino, or Gino, I think it's Gino, and all the sort of dangers that they face living their day-to-day life in the forest. It's a pretty long chronicle of that, actually, but it was really good. I honestly can't decide if I like the first or the second book better, and I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I completed is Shellfish. Selfish, Shallow, and Self-Absorbed. 16 Writers on the Decision Not to Have Kids, edited by Megan Daum. So it's pretty self-explanatory. It is a bunch of essays by somewhat famous writers on their decision not to procreate. And I loved this. I totally did. As you can see, I had a lot of things that I really liked about it and wanted to just save to look back on. I really identified with a lot of them, which was great. They were also really entertaining essays. They have a really great way of writing and telling the story of their lives and their decision on this issue. And yeah, I just really enjoyed it. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I completed is George by Alex Gino. Oh my gosh. This is going to be probably my top, definitely in my top 5 books that I have read in 2015. This was amazing. I said it in my review, and I heard Raylene from Padfoot and Prongs 07 say it, that she only wishes she could buy a copy for every child in the world. I completely agree, because there should have been a story like this told years ago, but I'm so grateful that it is finally here. George is a middle grade novel about a 9-10-year-old child named George who was born a boy but is a girl. There were so many things I loved about it. The writer Alex is such a great storyteller, and they really have a wonderful way of expressing childhood. I read stuff in here and remembered it happening in my childhood that nobody really thinks about or talks about, but Alex was able to. That was just great for me. I loved the emotion, the raw emotion. I have never wanted to cry so many times during the middle grade book. I really felt for George and her pain, and it was heartbreaking at times. But plotline, yes, George wants to be in the school production of Charlotte's Web, and she wants to play Charlotte. And the teacher says no. But George is really determined, and she knows the part inside and out. She can act it so well, but she just comes across so many obstacles in her path in just her day-to-day life. And so it's really a sad story at times, but in the end, there's a happy ending, fortunately. I don't want to give too much away, but yes, read it. I am telling you, you really should read this. It's not just transgender, but more about humanity. That's what I would say that this book is about, and I just loved it. 5 stars, duh. I also completed the audiobook of The Slippery Slope by Lemony Snicket. This is book 9. Yes. No. Oh my gosh, 10. We are at book 10. Oh my gosh. In this episode, Sunny Baudelaire is being held hostage by Count Olaf, and Violet and Klaus are on a icy mountain peak below her, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to get her back. Along the way, they meet up with someone who they actually thought was dead, and it's pretty good. There's another character who I'm also not going to say who makes a reappearance that I didn't think was going to happen, and I was pretty pleased to see it happen. A lot of big developments happen in this. Sunny really grows up, and Violet also comes into her own, and it was just really good. But I have to say, it's Sunny. She is my favorite character in this series. As a result of this book, I simply love her. And I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. And the next book that I completed is The Forest Family by Joan Bodger with illustrations by Mark Lane. I first got this very book, when I was around 11 years old. So this is a reread for me. I have read this book dozens of times. It is just one of my favorites, and I've always loved it. It is, as the title says, about a family that lives within the forest. And the father is the patriarch, and he goes off to war, and he comes back a very different man. And so a lot of the story, it's the wife Sylvania and her daughters Daisy and Rosie, who are on their own, living in the forest and living off the land, and it's just, they're basically living the kind of life that I only dream of living, honestly. There is magic in here, there are other stories and myths and legends that get incorporated into this, and it takes place at around the time of the Industrial Revolution, but you hardly know that they're in the modern world, because it's just so enchanted and wonderful, and I've always loved this book. I'm always going to love it and recommend it to people. It is technically, I would say, middle grade, but I think anybody of any age could enjoy it. 5 out of 5 stars. Please read this. And the second last book that I completed this month was Dumplin' by Julie Murphy. This is a teen novel, YA novel, contemporary, that just came out this past month. Yeah, it did. I read it. Oh my gosh, I got it just a few days after it came out and just blew through it in a couple of days. I love this book. This book was awesome. It was so good. It is about this girl, Dumplin'. Well, her name's Willow Dean, but her mom calls her Dumplin'. It's cute. She lives in the South, and she's a bigger girl. And there is this pageant, the Miss Bluebonnet pageant, that is a really big deal that her mom runs. And she, just through a series of events, she decides to get it. She decides to go in and try out for it. And it's a pretty big deal. Aside from this, she is also grieving the death of her aunt, who was a really big mother, like a really great mother figure for her. She loves Dolly Parton. She just has such a great attitude and sass, and she's really funny too. I wish there were more books like this, honestly, that really gives girls confidence to be themselves, because I enjoyed this so much. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. Finally, we've come to the end. Okay, the last book I read is a non-fiction book. It is called Inside Picture Books by Ellen Handler Spitz. So this was good. It came out in the 90s, and so there were a few opinions that she had that I either felt were outdated or just, I don't know, I didn't agree with everything that she said. But yes, it's like the title implies, it is just a book on different chapters focusing around picture books for children, a lot of which were classics that I was familiar with, and I've never read a book like this before that actually talks about those classic children's books that I grew up with, that were being read to me as a kid, and you know, the sort of politics and messages behind them. So it was really fascinating. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars, and I just wish there were more books like it, honestly, that talked about children's books, especially their illustrators, because, you know, I love illustration. So that's it. Those are the 13 books that I got through this month. Let me know in the comments below if you have read any of these books and what your opinions of them are. And have a great weekend. Bye, everyone!